happy to have Olivier come back and be with us today, all the way from Montreal on an early train in a very busy professional life in Montreal. And he's going to be taking the leadership in class later, but we were happy that he was willing to give time to do a seminar for us for CIDEC. And I think the topic is something of real interest because we tend to be split between the languages, really to get some understanding of what's going on in higher education, comparative higher education in the Francophone area. I think is of great interest to us. So Olivier got his PhD here quite a few years ago. He's had various roles and now an associate professor at the University of Montreal, building up the whole field of higher education and in the region. So we're very happy to have him come and share with us, and he'll be making a presentation, and then we'll just open things up for questions, discussions, dialogue. So thank you so much and welcome, Olivier. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Carolee. Thank you to the CIDEC community to receive me, welcome me today. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. So I stand here because when I used to be in this program in university, it was kind of the place where usually we present it. So I kind of want to stick to this place. Force of habit. So I welcome everyone online as well. So yes, faculty at the University of Montreal of Comparative Higher Education. I guess there are many subjects related to my research interests I could have talked about, the internationalization of technical vocational institutions or the academic profession or research production in the context, the political economic context of different countries that kind of foster or hinder academic research production. But I've been asked to discuss something a bit more personal about my professional journey and what we did with colleagues from the Francophone world to consolidate this field of higher education that has not reached the same level of maturity in different regions of the world. So this is the outline of the presentation. I will just present briefly what higher education is as a field of study, then the Francophone context, then the Canadian and Quebec context, and then talk a bit more about the actual experience of the case of Quebec, the province of Quebec, which is part of Canada, which is the Francophone province of Canada, and with some reflections about international academic relations being the way forward in this process. So, higher education, well, I'm pretty sure you kind of all know about this, but higher education as a sector corresponds to the level 5 to 8 of the International Standard Classification of Education. It's basically a sector that has for objective to pursue and transmit specialized and advanced knowledge, generally speaking. And higher education as a field of study can be defined as the interdisciplinary study of systems, organization, practices, processes, and dynamics related to higher levels of education. The field of study itself emerged in the early 20th century in Anglo-American context, which in the UK was founded the first journal, so in 1930, the Journal of Higher Education. The field consolidated in the Anglo-American context in the early 60s to address the need for data and interpretation for effective management and governance. So those words are important because it kind of led the way for the different types of study that would be conducted further. I said today, but actually in 2017, there were 120 scholarly journals on higher education, 86, so 72% of them were in English. There are also 450 degree programs on higher education in the world. 70% of them are in the US. So we can see a clear dominance of one region in this field. But it globally expanded beyond the United States, although there are some scholars have shown there are significant imbalances. So there's a core of well-connected author, and then there's a large periphery of authors who struggle to connect with the core of authors. So in the world, we have 216 scholarly associations in 47 countries on higher education. And that is a very interesting data or number. Since 2000, there were 93 new programs of higher education created in the world. 81% of them were created in China. The first PhD in higher education in China was created in 86. So we can see that, yes, there's a core mostly based in the US, but we can see that East Asia is rapidly growing as another core for higher education research. And what about the rest of the world? Well, according to the data I could get, there are only 7 programs in Africa, 3 in Latin America, according to one study, but according to the Times Higher Education, there would be 50. So, and I kind of believe that 50 number based on the collaborations I have with scholars from Latin America. In terms of journals, there are 27 in Chinese, 26 in Japanese, 15 in Spanish, 7 in German, and 8 in French, if we include journals that focus on university level pedagogy. So it's connected, of course, it's part of the higher education field, but it's one area. And what is interesting is that previous research has revealed a clear division between places, whether units or institutions or countries, that focus on governance, management, policy, and other countries or units or institutions that focus on pedagogy. And that is for me very interesting. And I will take here a map that was developed by McFarlane in 2012. Now, is it extremely accurate? Probably not. If you study higher ed, you will recognize some of the terms. You will also recognize some of the authors there. You have Becher, you have Clark, and all those. The idea here is that the field of higher education, it's actually 2 big islands that rarely talk to one another. The teaching and learning island and the policy island, broadly speaking. But and of course there are some that try to connect both the philosophy, institutional research, identity, development, and stuff. But see, so that for me is a very interesting depiction of the field. Okay, yes, next. Okay, good. Now, the Francophonie. So I'm French speaking, and maybe you heard that in my way of speaking. But what is the Francophonie? So it's a word we'll use to refer to French speaking nations, countries, people. We use Francophonie, which is actually a French word. So Francophonie is 321 million speakers on 5 continents. There's an organization called the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, or the International Organization of the Francophonie. It has 54 member states, and you kind of see them in the map behind. Now, the colors depend if they are observers or members, and I don't have the exact legend. I could go back to it. What about higher ed in the Francophonie? So, according to, and sometimes the data seems to, be not exactly compatible, but anyway. So there are more than 1,000 higher education institutions that are kind of French speaking. There are, in 2013, there were 200 million students studying in those French speaking institutions. So that's why when you look at 321 million speakers, and then you see that there's a projection of 400 million students in 2030. So like, how can it work? Well, you have people from other languages that can attend French-speaking institutions. Anyway, and taken together, French-speaking countries or members of the Francophonie invest more than $160 billion per year in higher education. But the field is not well developed. So there have been multiple calls for studies relevant to the French-speaking context and training for higher education teachers, professionals, and leaders. The core organization that is pushing this is the Agence Universitaire de la Francophonie, or the University Agency of the Francophonie. What it did, it created an International Academy of the Scientific Francophonie with an observatory, with publications, trying to support governance in different institutions. They created an annual congress with presentations and participants, all presenting in French about higher ed and stuff. And they created multiple programs to enhance research and teaching collaborations between Francophone institutions. So they have university network programs, they have a South-South mobility program, they have workshops and seminars for university leaders, and they have a catalog of programs that are all online and offered by Francophone universities to all the Francophone students in the world. So you apply for it, and if you're selected, you convert all your program online, and then if with a partnership with the AUF, it's offered annually to all students in the world, and it leads to actual degrees from the institution. So it's not something parallel, it's not continuing education, it's the actual degrees. So that is one thing that is taking place at the kind of inter-organizational level. But what about the institutional level? So outside of Canada, because I'll come to Canada in the next slide, there are only five Francophone institutions that offer program in higher education. 4 of those programs are in pedagogy, I'll come back to it again, and 1 is related to the governance of higher education. All of them are in Europe. There was 1 program on university governance in Cameroon from Université de between 2014 and 2019, and it doesn't exist anymore. So we don't have any other. So what about the Canadian context? So the data may have changed, but the last time I checked, there were 10 Canadian universities offering 20 programs in higher education, going from post-secondary certificates and of course, well, if you are at OISE, you probably know those programs already, the student development, all the MEd, the EDD, and then the PhD. I did give example of courses. Then you have at Memorial what is offered, Railroads. Of course, OISE has the biggest numbers of different programs offered. But the Memorial, BC, Railroads in BC, Simon Fraser in BC, University of British Columbia. So BC is actually well involved in the field. University of Calgary, University of Manitoba, University of Saskatchewan, Wilfrid Laurier, and York universities. They are all offered. Now, if you look at the courses, except actually, that's one thing interesting. So except for OISE, Railroads, and UBC, they're all programs for professionals. They're not research-based programs. Then if you look also at the example of courses, so you have recurring issues and the systems and governance, and then you have leadership and learning, you have organizational theory, foundations, organization administration, adult learners, you have finances, administration, governance. So you can see it's very well connected to how we manage higher education, what is the policy in the field. And now you'll see when we talk sometimes about in French we say les deux solitudes, the 2 solitudes, the 2 loneliness of Canada. So here's what happens in Quebec. So Quebec so just a little background. I don't know to what extent you know about Quebec. So Quebec is the 2nd most populous province of Canada. In terms of territory, it is the biggest. It's 8 million people. There are 20 universities in Quebec. 85% of the population of Quebec speaks French. Most of the universities teach in French. So you probably heard about McGill, sometimes Concordia or Bishop. So yes, in the 20 universities, there are 3 that are English speaking, 17 French speaking. What happened in Quebec is that the college sector, we call it the CIDEC, so the college sector had to go through a major reform. And it was the first, actually, one of the first sectors, one of the first technical sectors in the world to adopt a competency-based approach. And that required a lot of the needs for training. And universities in the late 90s and early 2000s created specific short-term programs, postgraduate, of course, because college teachers have at least an undergraduate degree. So postgraduate programs in pedagogy for the specific need of training college teachers. So that's how higher ed developed in Quebec. So University of Montreal, where I teach, and that's before 2022, because I'm going to show you what we did after 2022. But so we had a postgraduate diploma in post-secondary education. UQAM had at 1 postgraduate diploma, like we say 2nd and 3rd cycle, because in French, in Quebec, 1st cycle is bachelor's, and 2nd cycle is master's, and 3rd cycle is the PhD. So when we say postgraduate 3rd cycle, it means for people who have at least a master's degree, it's a postgraduate, but kind of with doctoral level courses in university pedagogy. That one was created way more recently. University of Laval and University of Sherbrooke are the only 2 with actual degrees and an MEd in college teaching at University of Laval and higher education pedagogy at University of Sherbrooke. Sherbrooke, as you can see, has the biggest numbers of different programs, but it's mostly 1 program that is kind of multiplied in different streams, but it's kind of the same program. If you look at the courses, you'll see the difference. Teaching at the college level, assessing learning, teaching models and strategies, reflective practice, measures and evaluation in the college system, psychosocial development of the young adult, principles of college learning. So you see, higher ed is a very different conversation here than it is in other contexts. And so if we take this archipelago, we have those two islands, and the blue circle would be Quebec. We're focused on one island, and I wouldn't say all Canada's focused on the other one, because you have here the Master in Teaching in the profession that you also do this. But if we think generally, I just look at the name titles of the courses offered as well, it seems to be kind of a different focus in different parts. But consolidating the field may require to bridge those. And I think OISE did well, especially with this master. We're talking about education, the professions and all that, kind of try to put together those fields. What we did in Quebec is quite interesting. So I did my PhD here at OISE in higher ed with a specialization in comparative international development education. And higher ed was not, since it's not consolidated as a field in Quebec, it meant that there are no job opening in higher ed. So I applied in a comparative ed position and got it, and I promote myself as a comparative higher education scholar. Once I got there, it's like, well, now there's a need at field to create or consolidate this field with colleagues. And so how do we consolidate a field? Well, type would say you need a specific research object. You need accumulation of specialized knowledge on this subject. You need organizing theories and concepts. You need terminologies. You need specific research methods, and you need institutional manifestation that the field exists. Veteran Schroeder in Tribes and Territories would say, well, a field is a culture, and it's based on organizational structures, so units like a department, and social structures, a sense of belonging. People need to feel that they belong to this field. And Favre, a French scholar, said, well, a field is people claiming to a common denomination, agreement on an object of study, an existence of teaching and research institutions that are perceived as legitimate. So it's not only just create organization, it needs to be perceived as legitimate by the institutions, the public many administrators, or by the academic community itself, and the existence of media for research dissemination like journals. So in my head, when I got there, and I think he said, well, to consolidate the field of education, we need a research structure and a teaching structure. So let's start with research. So I got there, and I went to my colleague Alexandre Beaupré-Lavallée, who's he's a specialist in higher education administration in the same faculty as I am. So it's great. And then I went to this senior professor, full prof, Francisco Loyola, who is an expert in university pedagogy. And since I'm comparative education in my faculty, I'm considered foundations. We're kind of split between admin, pedagogy, and foundations. Foundation being all the people who kind of study the education system, but they're, philosophy, economy, political science, and all stuff. And we said, let's create a structure that is open to everyone, the most open possible. So we created the Laboratory for Interdisciplinary Research on Higher Education, the LIRES. It's an open space, but it wasn't funded in any way. So the idea was to create a gathering and dissemination place for initiatives related to research and training on all facets of higher education in Quebec, Canada, internationally. It needed to be interdisciplinary because we had people from different disciplines studying the same subjects. It needed to be interuniversity in a sense that in different universities, well, people from different universities, because what I realized is that there are a lot of professors studying higher education in Quebec, but they are isolated. So you have this one sociology professor in his department of sociology, and no one understands what he's doing. You have this one teacher in public administration, and he's studying higher education policy and funding. No one understands what he's doing. You have people at the Faculty of Education who don't care about K-12, or they don't care, they don't focus on that. And no one understands what they're doing. We have the same thing in law. We had a professor in social communication departments. And so we need to break the isolation and foster a sense of belonging, the idea of consolidated field through belonging. And focus on the next generation, we needed a place where students during their MA and the PhD who are even more isolated than the professors when they are doing their thesis or master's thesis or doctoral thesis on higher education, because when they go to their seminars and they present, most people don't understand what they're doing. And it was such a success, and we didn't plan for that, that in December 2020, the LIRES became the largest group of higher education researchers in the whole Francophonie in the world. And today, we have more than 100 members. In 2020, we didn't have, we were the biggest, but we had no funding. So I asked a student and had still some money I could pay, like, can you create a website? And then I was doing the newsletter myself on my computer. I said, this is not working. We're like too big now for this. So a subgroup of researchers said, well, you know what? We'll get together and we're going to try to get funding. So we applied and we got a research grant from the Quebec Research Council for infrastructure. So for 4 years, we have this funding and we could hire a coordinator. That is amazing. We kind of have our own Carly Mannion, but in a very smaller way. And just a few hours. We can only pay her for a few hours a week. So it's definitely not the same. But that changed everything. We could create discussion groups, a conference cycle, annual symposium, collective work. We give awards and scholarships to students. We created a doctoral school. We try to encourage co-supervision of students with professors from different universities in the field of higher education. And we also had our structure. So we have a general assembly for all the members. We have a coordinating committee, and we try to create a sense of belonging with social activities and everything. But what about teaching? I'm almost done. So as I said, in 2001, there was at the University of Montreal a short postgraduate diploma in post-secondary education that I renamed, once I became coordinator, higher education in 2023. And as I said, it was aimed primarily at training college-level teachers. And there had been attempts to create a program for higher education professional and administrators. So 3 attempts that all failed, 2014, 18, 19. So instead of creating a program, my colleagues and I, we tried to create courses that are outside or beyond pedagogy. So my colleague Alexandre was hired before me. He created one called Leadership and Professional Environments in Higher Education. And it became an elective course of this postgraduate diploma. I was hired in 2018, and I created the first course I created was Foundation in Issues in Higher Education, which is basically a mix of recurring issues that you're offering here at OIC and comparative higher ed that you're also. So I kind of merged both together and mushed them together, and it became this course that I'm still teaching today. Then I said, you know what? Let's create a course on internationalization, and I partnered with 7 professors from 7 other universities in Quebec and said, let's create an inter-university course, because there's no way any of us will have enough students in that specific field. We don't have a J9 of our own in Quebec to get this. So we created that. And Alexandre, the most recent course he created was College and University Administration. So we had courses. And then something happened. The Faculty of Education in our institution decided that it was too complicated to have multiple programs managed by different departments, and decided that all programs in the faculty would be managed centrally by the faculty itself. So now the question is, why do we have departments anymore? And if they don't have any programs of their own. But that created an opportunity. So I went to see my colleagues in admin, I went to see my colleagues in pedagogy, and I said, you know what? Now let's create a program that is at a faculty level. Let's bridge beyond our kind of disciplinary borders. And so what we did first is a market study, because we needed to prove that there was a need. So we did a market studies, and we realized that in the people we surveyed, and among them were staff in higher ed. So 79% of the staff in university and college level had not received any training in higher ed. Of course, they had human resource management degrees, or degrees in finances, or degrees in communication, strategic planning, international relations, but no one had, or almost no one had, training in higher ed. And 59% of them would love or would like to receive some training in that field. So, well, that was our key here. So, we need to create this program. So at the end of April, I was asked by the dean to lead an ad hoc committee on higher education programs, and I mobilized 5 other colleagues. We have 3 departments, and we proposed this specialized graduate diploma, still not a degree, in higher education with 2 concentrations. You see the 2 islands. And that was the first program in Quebec and the first program in the Francophonie to offer a concentration for teaching, for college and university teachers, and administration for college and university managers. So we could bridge those 2 divisions and actually create courses that are common to both, that we needed a common core. And now, after that, what we did, so well, next January, starting this January, thanks to I told you about the AUF creating a catalog of online programs. So we applied to that catalog and we got accepted. So we converted our postgraduate diploma that was in person fully online, and we will offer it to cohorts of international students who don't need to come to Canada. They will receive training on pedagogy and administration in higher education. And we have students from Mali, from Senegal, from Cameroon, from Burkina Faso, from Haiti, from Tunisia, from Morocco. We have no one from Europe. That's fine. So we have that, and we're very happy. And next September, finally, we'll be able to open an MEd, so the first degree at the University of Montreal in higher education, again with the same 2 concentrations. But as you can see, it's still very focused on professionals. We don't have an MA in higher ed, we don't have a PhD in higher ed. We have a PhD in educational sciences, and we have an MA in educational sciences, and I have students with me who do that, they study higher ed, but still, it's very focused on the professionals themselves. And now what are the next steps? So from the beginning, everything I showed you, of course I tried to be as involved as possible and try to create something. It's very meaningful when you're able to be in a new place and try to establish something new. But none of this would have been possible just me by myself. Everything was through collaborations, first with my 2 colleagues at the faculty, and then with other Quebec scholars in different departments and institutions, and then abroad. So, and that is interesting. So how do we expand collaborations? Well, Quebec as a province has a kind of a very strong paradiplomatic strategy, and usually Quebec, when it has diplomatic activities, it's based on 2 pillars. The first one is we are based in a continent that is the American continent. So we need to take that into account. The second one is that we are mostly Francophone. And the LIRES has used kind of the same logic to expand. So the first thing is that the LIRES now has member in Brazil, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, France. We have 2 members from Ontario that are actually in OIC, so Grace Karen Stephenson and Eric Lavigne are part of the LIRES. We have members in Haiti, Morocco, Switzerland. And we are in discussions with partners in Latin America to create an inter-American network for study or higher education. We realize in that field that our colleagues from Latin America are actually way more advanced than we are in the Francophonie in this field. Like they have the UNESCO ESALC, they have programs in higher ed, they are way more advanced. So we're trying to catch up with Latin America. And last fall, the General Assembly of the LIRES gave a mandate to its coordinating committee to negotiate an agreement with another research unit in Cameroon that's kind of trying to develop what we did in Quebec. So we're acting like as mentors. Teaching collaborations are way more delicate, discussed it, than research. Everyone wants to collaborate in research, but when it comes to teaching, it's who counts as students and where are they enrolled. But we would love to have student exchanges in higher ed. Because ultimately, what we want is to equip Francophone jurisdictions with research and training that enables them to support the development of higher education systems. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be happy